Hello and welcome to Real World HR, the podcast which is putting the human back into HR. I'm Louise Kennedy, HR expert, chartered CIPD professional and founder of award-winning HR consultancy Oculus HR. In the Real World HR podcast, we focus on people and business, telling the stories that we've learned from and explaining the processes that we've supported solutions. In this episode, I'm joined by my fantastic Oculus HR team. We'll be diving into discussions on some hot topics in HR at the moment, looking at things such as the 4-day working week, but also coming back to what we do, grievances, dismissals, redundancies, performance management, and just explaining our stories. Along with sharing the stories we've recently experienced, we'll also give you advice to help navigate these issues in your own role and within your own business. Ready to step in the real world of HR? So thank you very much for the two of you being here today, Claire and Deb. It's been about 6 months since we did our last podcast together, so I'm kind of really pleased to get us back round and to be able to do this, however much I know that the two of you love doing it. So what we have been doing is obviously working on the Real World HR podcasts, and what we've really just been trying to do is educate people a little bit more, give them some more information, some takeaways, things that they might be able to put in place within the business. And we've obviously had quite a few different themes since we last had our conversation together. But I think what I really want to do is kind of go back to where it is that we are and what it is that we provide to our clients and how we help people and how we support people there as well. And just be able to think about how we can move things forward. So I'm just going to ask you to reintroduce yourselves from here. So Deb, you've been with us for ever and a day.
More or less.
Yeah. So probably kind of 8 years or so, isn't it?
It is,
yeah.
yes.
About 8 years. Do you want to just let me know what kind of the last 6 months has been like for you, obviously, other than being ultra busy?
Yeah, I think we'd all agree that it's been a busy last 6 months. I think it's been quite varied, really, as it usually is. We've covered all sorts of issues. I think there've been a lot of grievances of varying degrees, disciplinaries, some redundancies. We've welcomed quite a lot of new clients on board and spent some time working with them. So yes, it has been a busy time.
Yeah. And from that point of view, new clients were kind of location-wise, sector-wise, it all seems to vary, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, I think, location-wise, looking at we've got clients all over the country, but I think our main location, we're looking at sort of towards Northumberland, to the north, down into Yorkshire, really, to the south, aren't we?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And sector-wise, I think it's hard to now find a sector that we don't work with. We've got some, couple of new or relatively new clients in the education sector.
Yeah.
We've been covering manufacturing for some time. We have some retail clients, hospitality clients, yeah. Some of the care sector. I think it is hard to find a group that we don't work with in some way, shape or form.
But that comes back to people are people ultimately, isn't it? Obviously, for our understanding of a business to be able to go in and help and support them. And I think we were discussing it the other day very much around that commercial aspect, isn't it? Because we've got the commercial view of being able to fit into a business, and the people element of it feeds in, doesn't it? And I think that's what we find so we don't need to be specialists within the sector. But, once we talk about the commercial aspect of what they want to achieve within their business, then obviously we talk about the outcomes and ultimately what they want to be able to do with their people and whether it's good or bad, kind of whatever the circumstance may be, that's how we are enabling ourselves to be able to support them, isn't it?
It is. It's transferable skills.
Yeah.
And I think the main point that I see it is being commercially aware enough to be able to understand the main priorities for that business so that we can give solutions to them which are legally compliant but also fit their business and the outcome that they want to achieve.
Yeah, so really trying to take a bit more of a pragmatic view, isn't it, of what it is that way.
Yeah, rather than simply a textbook HR approach, but to give something that commercially works for them.
Yeah, and I think we've had some nice feedbacks even. There was one just the other day we did a small piece of work bit for her, and it was somebody I'd spoke to, and she just said, wow, I just wish I'd found you years ago. This would have been a massive difference in my business. And actually, we were just doing one piece of work before she sold the business. But I think even that kind of that reassurance that actually, we are out there and we're doing the right thing for people to be able to support their businesses and to be able to help them, really, isn't it? To be able to hold the hand of the manager as they work through, or the leader to be able to work through the business. Yeah. So, and then we've got Claire here. So Claire's been working with us a couple of days a week over the last year, just over a year. But we're really excited to say that she's obviously going to come on board full time within the next few weeks, which is really good. So, and obviously from a team point of view, we've certainly got the workload for her to be able to kind of take on there. But obviously, we're really kind of pleased to be able to welcome her on board on a full-time basis as well. What have you enjoyed the most? Putting you on the spot there. What did you like about working with us?
Well, I've enjoyed so much of it. It's so different, it's so varied. And I think, for me, it's working with local business, local people, building those relationships up and really supporting them for what they need at that moment in time. And for some of them, we have long-standing relationships, and for some, it's just one small piece of work, and then, they move on from us. But I think it's very different to working in the corporate world, where there's lots of challenges to cut through to actually what is it that you need to do. Where I think when we're working with these businesses and listening to them and hearing what it is they want to do, we can advise them in the right way. And then they can make the decision that's right for their business and feel that we've supported them through that, which can be some difficult decisions.
Yeah. And I think it's really hard. I mean, obviously we always encourage about getting that base level in right, don't we? Making sure that they're in contracts, and not even massive amount of policies, but just having sufficient amount of policies that actually when an issue comes up, like what you're talking about, that actually you've got some scope of being able to do something and taking the next steps, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. Core policies, I think, are really key. We talked about, we've had some new clients come on board and some existing ones as well. Actually getting the basics in place, for me, there's some real cornerstones of that. So it's contracts, so people know what it is that they're expected to do. Policies, core policies, so that they know how they're going to be treated in any set of situations, and a handbook of what it's culturally like to work here. And there's a golden thread runs through those three key pillars for me that any business needs. And then when you do find yourself in any challenging situations, you can call upon those pillars to look to see how are you going to approach the situation and what's in place, and does the employee know what's expected of them and what's going to happen if they're going through a process.
And one of the other things that you said there, Claire, was around kind of making putting your culture into your documentation, making sure that you've got that. And I know that that's something that we've just recently done kind of as a team, because we wanted to ensure that actually what we're delivering out is the same as what we're thinking that we're doing, and I think we established that we're all very similar and we all deliver in the same, we deliver the same way, well, not quite the same way, but we deliver as we would all expect each other to, obviously, but with slightly different ways. So I think we've kind of like taken a step to go, right, okay, what are we about? Who are we? What are our morals around? What are our morals is one of them. What are our values? And what is it that we all kind of stand for? And we very much come up with kind of morally, we like to know what's right and wrong, like we're within a business, we're kind of advised on that. We advise around the risk, so actually we'll be telling you if there was a risk within the business or within a circumstance that we're dealing with, is that. And certainly consistency. I think consistency comes up for us time and time again. It doesn't matter whether the client says, well, I'm not happy with that response, or I know you had this the other day, Deb, I'm not happy with that, or I want you to do something different. That's absolutely fine, as long as we've told you exactly the steps that need to be taken. We're not going to change because the law doesn't change and the policies don't change. And therefore, we can amend our approach of how we're dealing with it, but ultimately it's the company decision on what it is that we're doing. So I think we felt quite comfortable with that as being our kind of underpinning values, isn't it?
Definitely. Yes. Yeah, definitely. And I think it's about being really clear, because you just mentioned there about advising on the risk. That's our role there. The business owner makes the decision. We can advise on, if you do this, it could look like this. If you do this, it looks like something else. But given all the facts, so they make an informed decision. Yeah. And we're clear on that. They've had all the information, and then that's what they go and do.
Yeah. And I think that's just an important point from where we come from. And I think kind of aligning our values, making sure that we're comfortable with them. I think it was quite a good exercise, certainly I thought the other day, because I think it just kind of highlighted that we are out there delivering to the way that we're expecting that, ourselves to deliver and each other to deliver within that as well.
I think we can look in the mirror and say we demonstrate what we're asking other businesses and how we advise them, can't we?
Yeah, yes. I think without a doubt, I think we definitely can. So over kind of the last 6 months, as you said, Deb, we've kind of had loads of different new situations and new circumstances, and we have had a couple of situations that out of all the time that I've worked in HR, I've actually got employment tribunal status, one of which was a few months ago, probably about 6 months ago, and it went into that situation, and it was around attendance management and a process that would followed, and the client came out and they'd obviously won the case because we had been consistent in the approach that we were doing. We had kind of made sure that we were fully aware of a circumstance, that we'd kind of taken it through step by step. And I think that I suppose in essence puts a little bit of, it validates what it is that we do, doesn't it? Because we can advise people, and sometimes you can think, we need to ensure that people are following the right process to be able to do it. And we're not always about the process, we're about the commercial aspect, we're about being pragmatic in what it is that we do. But it is really important that people have that awareness. So actually, these situations do come up and we have been there. And then obviously I actually went to a tribunal last week, which was the first time ever for me, kind of sitting in the room, and you do think, actually, you don't want to be voluntarily sitting in this room.
No.
But again, fortunate enough that we're able to go through the process that was there. And after day one, the ex-employee walked away because he knew he didn't have a case. And that was again because we'd done A, B and C, we'd done it in the right way, in the right order, with compassion, with care, taking their needs into play. And I think he just really got hung up on something, in particular that he'd kind of, ran off with. And I think then obviously realised that actually, we'd been more than fair in the process that we'd done. And I think again, that just I was kind of proud of what it was that we did and what we delivered, because actually just puts that, it's a rubber stamp, isn't it? That actually it's
confirmation, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And that sometimes some processes do seem long and drawn out, and some people might get a bit frustrated by that. But actually, when you need to do certain things at certain times to enable the business to be protected in the right type of way. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely.
And I think sometimes it might just be one more meeting than maybe the client had hoped for.
Yeah.
It might be one more conversation, one more medical report that we check, which at the time, there might be frustration that we have to do that. But it does just double check those points. It just makes sure that we're maintaining that consistency, and it is validated when you're in a situation like that, and you can justify what you've done, and it's shown that it's correct.
It is, and I think to be able to sit there and to be able to comfortably sit there and think, oh yeah, we did the right thing. Yeah, that was right. And then at the end of the first day, not even getting on the stand from our point of view, but at the end of the first day, for him to go actually, and it's called drop hands, just to walk away, that's kind of just such a kind of, that is good, that we're in a good position and that we're delivering what we say.
And it could be articulated in that situation, couldn't it? Everything that had been put in place and the reasons why. And when questioned, there was no gaps in anything, was there? So that's why it ended up in the way, because we'd followed it in, as you say, put the needs of the person in those conversations. And maybe we did have more conversations than we initially thought, but actually it's paid off because it's been the right thing to do. And that's what the three of us, this is what we're about. It's about the right thing to do, isn't it?
Which goes back to our moral value, isn't it? About where we stand. When you kind of did your intro there, Deb, you kind of mentioned one of the things that we've had is grievances. I feel like we've definitely had more grievances in the last few months than what we've ever had. I think I definitely thought there was a spike during COVID. I felt like everybody put grievances about everybody else. And I think I certainly found that within the care sector that we dealt with. I think there was some kind of pretty big grievances there. But the recent grievances that we've had have all been against kind of the main people within the business, whether it's a CEO, whether it's been lead people within the business, which are quite difficult, aren't they? Because actually we're delivering a service and investigating, but you then end up investigating this high level within a business. So it does become uncomfortable. But I think the important point that I really want to mention now was, but people have the opportunity to put a grievance in against anybody for any kind of circumstance, and there needs to be shown that a thorough investigation's taken place. What's your kind of thoughts around that side of things? Obviously, we've been involved in the midst of 4/5 over the last few months.
Absolutely. I think that is the case. So people do have that right to put that grievance in. I think sometimes in some situations it could be avoided because some things could possibly be managed at an earlier stage or raised at an earlier stage, depending on the situation. And then the grievance wouldn't arise. But we do have these grievance procedures. People do have the right to use them. And then, yes, it's investigating it and finding out what the outcome is, whether that is an outcome that the senior person that the grievance has been raised against may like or agree with or not.
Yeah.
But, from our point of view, it is done fairly, and we will give that fair feedback, and we will give the honest feedback that we think is needed. And
I think that's really can be difficult, can't it? We're sometimes in a bit of a rock and a hard place, because obviously then you feed them back into the senior person within the business to say, this is actually any recommendations that have been made or what it is that you need to do to make a difference with regard to that working relationship. I think, and that is difficult to do, isn't it?
It is difficult. Yeah. It's difficult for it to be delivered, but it's also difficult for them to hear, isn't it? And it's a sign of their leadership, how they take that feedback and that recommendations, because it can be uncomfortable hearing.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone ever sets out with the intent of it getting to a grievance, but I think a lot of what we've been dealing with is around how people have been made to feel about that impact and about that understanding and seeing it from a different viewpoint. But I also think that people can, sometimes have an outcome for a grievance that's not really suitable for the situation they're in. So absolutely they can have a desired outcome, but whether or not that's absolutely how it will play out and what's practical is a different thing, isn't it?
I know.
And I think it's trying to manage that expectation as someone's going through a grievance procedure as to what each part of that procedure entails and what the potential outcome is.
And exactly right. Understanding those steps, step by step, to say, well, actually, the next step's going to be this, and putting time frames within it. I know we like to move through with kind of more of a pace, really, don't we? And I know a couple of times we've been a bit more kind of frustrated because there's been other obstacles in the way, because actually, when someone raises a grievance, it's because someone's been upset about a particular situation, and whether it's right or wrong, whether they raise that grievance or not, but the fair process needs to take place within a timely manner, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I think when anyone does that, they can't move on until that's been resolved one way or the other, or they've got an outcome. Yeah. Whether it's the outcome they're expecting is a different matter, but I think, that period of time, so I think we do want to give it the time that is needed, thorough investigations and clear meeting time scales. But actually, if that's out of our control, that can be difficult, because we still know there's somebody waiting to hear that outcome and that information. And also, if there's recommendations to be made, they can't be put in place until it's completed. So again, for somebody who's had a grievance raised against them and there is some recommendations, that's also taken time to get it to that stage.
Yeah. And sometimes with that, we end up with people who are off sick, who raise the grievances, which again, they're then out of the workplace for such a period of time. And it makes it more difficult to kind of get that engagement of getting them back into the workplace as well, doesn't it? So I think that can be really difficult to get the people back engaged within the business to ensure that they do return to work at some point as well. Yeah, or not if they choose not to.
And I think it is hard for people when they've been out of the business for a long time, for whatever the reason, absence or grievance or, anything like that bringing them back in and what's that going to feel like can take some time. And the longer it is, the harder it is to step over the threshold, isn't it?
And it's about making sure that those right procedures are in place, when people maybe are off with a grievance, but actually then still following through with kind of an attendance management route, to kind of have those regular meetings. So there's some contact, not necessarily from the person who's doing the grievance, but somebody else within the business to be able to say, how are you? What's the circumstances? How is things going? How are you managing day to day? Because they're the bits inevitably that they'll come back to know that they've been supported somewhere along the line. So you've got to be careful as a business owner when things like that are put in, and obviously genuinely they are put in against lead people within the business, that the right steps are being taken around it as well, because ultimately you want to look after the employee. So it's a big situation, isn't it?
It is, and I think sometimes people, because someone's put in a grievance, then do the opposite and think, well, then I won't contact them and I better not contact them because I might upset them. I don't dare do it. And then the person who isn't being contacted feels isolated. Yeah. And then it's even harder to get them back into the business. So I think it is making sure that you don't shy away from those steps or taking the advice or finding someone who can take those steps for you to make sure that that's done.
Yeah, and making sure, again, back to the policy and procedure, that you've got the right policy and procedures, that if somebody does raise something, then there's a way to be able to manage the process. Think back to it, and I think we might have mentioned the last one that was the software developer all those years ago that was kind of, no, I don't want to put any policies in. And then when he ended up in a very, very sticky situation with two of his employees, he said, I understand why we need the policies now. We haven't got them, and now we are where we are. And I think, as we said, we're not all about the policy. We're just, the policy provides the structure to enable a business to operate.
Yeah, it's that framework, isn't it? It's just something to just reference and be aware of and be clear on. And again, it helps us create that consistency, doesn't it? And I think sometimes we have businesses that can be very knee-jerk to a situation and will only want us when there's a situation or a crisis or something needs to be resolved really quickly, and they want our time and attention immediately. But actually, we've talked to them a number of times about putting the foundations of the contracts, of the policies. Yeah. And actually, if we did that, it's not that those situations won't arise, but they'll be much easier to manage and much quicker to resolve and get to a conclusion. Yeah. So it's about trying to help our clients and business owners understand the importance of putting those pillars in when they do come to these situations where they're like, right, we really need some help now. Can you sort this? It's gone too far.
Yeah.
And then asking for our support there, where actually we can be proactive. And I think sometimes HR has a bit of a reputation of you only brought in when there's a really serious issue and they need someone sorting out or, exiting out of the business in whatever context. But actually we can do a lot of value adding. Yeah. And actually the things we're talking about there with the contracts, the policies, the handbook, with the cultural side of it, really can change that so that they're not as frequent or, there's a lot more framework around it, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
And I think it gets forgotten sometimes as well that we can provide some advice before it gets to that formal point. And with that, it might not get to that formal point if it's something that we can just discuss with someone or advise them on how they can discuss it with someone to resolve the issue. Because, for most employees, taking out a grievance will be a stressful situation. Definitely. It is a big deal for people. So if it is something that can be resolved with a conversation or a few less formal meetings that avoids the needing to go off sick or the isolation that people can sometimes feel going through those processes, then that can be a much quicker, easier and more painless solution to everyone.
It definitely does.
If you're able to step in.
Yeah. And I think, I know we've just done a case study on one of our clients, but they are kind of an ideal client, as in, you obviously know who I'm talking about. They kind of went through and put all the policies and procedures in place, but now they use us as in, we think this might be going to happen. Actually, what should we do? If this does happen, what will we do? If that is the reaction of it, how should we handle that? And actually that's where we want to be at, isn't it? To be able to provide that advice before the things take place or as things are happening, then at least people can manage them sometimes more informally to be able to resolve a situation without it then starting to become paperwork and meetings and investigations and things, and not shying away from that. But actually sometimes people just want to have a little voice, they just want to be heard by somebody. And
they just want to have a conversation. Yeah. If they don't feel they're being listened to, they feel they've got no other option. But actually a lot of the grievances we've dealt with in the last 6 months, actually if you go back to it, if there'd been a conversation at an early stage and someone had felt listened to, then actually it may not have got to where it did. And it can be quite difficult for them to then go back.
Yeah, to go back to it. So grievance obviously has been a big one for us, and I think ongoing wise, we obviously we have disciplinary situations, kind of like always, don't we? We always have disciplinary situations. And one of the ones we were just talking about before we came on there, well, a few of them is around HGV drivers at the moment, and we had kind of a space about 5 or 6 within kind of about 3 weeks where we're literally where
very
people
short space of time.
where people use the mobile phones. One that we were just like in disbelief of. One woman was using an iPad
and a phone
and driving on the M25, probably doing 50 miles an hour as she was driving. Very good at multitasking, that lady was. So she obviously didn't have her hands on the steering wheel at all. And then we had somebody else who he was gambling while he was driving. So he had hold of his mobile phone. He actually had his arm up on the window, so like on the top of the window, didn't he? On the resting on there whilst driving 56 miles an hour, which sticks in my mind. These situations come up and they're actually very real situations that you need to deal with, don't they? From a business point of view, it's about what's tolerated, isn't it? You could look the other way and kind of think, oh, that didn't happen. But the only reason that these all came up was because something had been raised, and actually they went and looked on the CCTV cameras and looked on to see kind of what was happening in the cab at the time, and that's where all of these came from. But I think it's quite the fact that people are out there driving HGVs with mobile phones, iPads, gambling, people are just being very complacent about it. And it's interesting people's reaction to it as well, isn't it? Yeah. Obviously those 3 kind of different situations I've mentioned there, they all reacted completely different and completely different, the circumstance.
They did, and I think the issue wasn't actually about what they were doing, it was the fact that we'd observed them from the CCTV, wasn't it? So it was less about they weren't in control of the vehicle in the way that they should have been. Yeah. And from a health and safety perspective, but actually why were you observing us on the CCTV, which we'd been really clear about, and the sign's up and it's in their policies. But it's interesting that that's the response that they took, as opposed to actually, I might not have been driving safely on the roads and what could that have done? It was more, well, why are you looking at me?
Yeah, why are you watching the CCTV? And I think that brings you very well onto the fact that actually making sure that CCTV might have come later, and certainly in that business it did, but we made sure that we had the strength behind a policy, or people had signed off to say they'd been trained, they understood that there was CCTV outside and inside, and that same business, someone put a sock over the CCTV camera inside the vehicle. So those things kind of, as they're coming up, you kind of, you know, you need to make sure that the right things are in place to comfortably then do your disciplinary action or your dismissals or however it may be, based on the fact that you've got that right. It's important, isn't it?
Yeah. And they need to know that, and that we can refer back to it. And again, that's when the policies are important for those situations, for us to be able to stand, you know, and hold them to account, really, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And there was one particular one out of that group that we're just talking about there. And I mean, obviously, as I say, we've done these roles for years and years, haven't we? So probably about 25 years or so for me to be able to do it. And that one of the particular guys, it was done over kind of a Zoom call. Such a difficult meeting to do. And that comes with my wealth of experience. And I remember I had to break during the course of the meeting because of the way that he was being, the confrontational, his attitude, his own conduct within it, and obviously trying to keep it very, very calm and on track. And I think we said a couple of times, if that had been someone who was inexperienced, he would have just eaten them for dinner. He would have just literally spat them out afterwards as well. And I think was very much his behaviour, what he was trying to do to me. But that is a difficult situation to be in. If you, as I say, if we weren't experiencing it, then it would have been a lot worse, a lot more difficult to be able to deal with. Yeah,
and I think it's having the experience when you're dealing with those situations, because as you say, it gets taken away from, was I driving safely? To why were you watching me? So it's bringing it back in those meetings to, you know, is it appropriate to gamble online while you're driving a truck at 56 miles an hour going down a motorway? You know, it is, you know, having the confidence and the experience to know that you need to bring that back round and try to get them to face what they were doing and why they thought that was the right choice to make.
Yeah, because I think you can get distracted.
You can get taken down a totally different track. You know, and deflection of the actual real situation as to what you're there to discuss. So I think it does take some time and some experience to kind of bring that conversation and have the confidence to do that, because there can be quite intimidating situations if you're not comfortable or you've not had a lot of experience of them. And, you know, for us that we have had a lot of experience of, you know, we don't go into them complacent because every situation's different, and we don't take the decision lightheartedly when we're advising. It is hard. And it will be hard for people, but we're there to support them if they're in those difficult circumstances.
But one of the things that I always say to people is that we still prep to go into a meeting. You know, so even though we come, I mean, both of you nodding your head straight away, we won't go into a meeting without prepping.
No.
And even if that comes down to like a low level lateness disciplinary or something, or, you know, an attendance review that's going to potentially be an informal outcome, we still always prep because actually you need to know what to say, how to say it, the structure that's going to be put in place, the circumstances that are, and you need to be able to record the information somewhere and get that information. And I probably can't express how important it is to have those notes, you know, at any level. And obviously Hayley, who works with us, she's absolutely brilliant at going through and getting us on track with regard to kind of notes and keeping things as good as what we need them to be. Because actually when you get back to those situations that were said about employment tribunals, you can pull all your information out and say, no, this is why we did it, this is what was said, this was the content of the conversation. So the prep, I can't express how important it is, and also making sure that the notes that are taken are kind of up to the scratch that need to be, because you never know when you're going to need to use them again. And I'm asking you this because I know what the response is. How does it make you feel when someone says, just give that person a verbal warning? And you say, did you have a meeting with them? Oh, no, I didn't have a meeting with them.
It was only a verbal warning.
It was only a verbal warning.
Yeah. Or it's just a first written warning.
It's just a first written warning.
It's all right.
Didn't bother giving them a meeting or telling them what was wrong.
Yeah. Or actually, we're just going to have a conversation with them and they're just going to go, have you met with them? No, it'll be fine. We'll just meet them in the pub or in the cafe near
McDonald's.
And it'll be fine. Okay, so here's the rest. Yeah, but they won't even know that, so it's not a problem. Okay. So we do have some of those situations where no, it's not really important. And we're like, I'm just advising you, this is really what you should be doing. However, the decision is yours.
And that's a bit where sometimes, I mean, I'm laughing about it because it still happens. That conversation that you've just had there happened like 2 weeks ago, didn't it? Yeah, I'm just going to meet them at a cafe beside ours, and I'll just let them know they don't need to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be fine.
It'll be fine.
They'll know it's coming.
But I think, you know, kind of looking at that, people don't always realise in situations, do they? You know, so when we're talking about grievances, very often a grievance comes, and I'm categorising here so I don't kind of take it literal, but there's generally been some concern with an individual at some point. It's not all cases, but there's been a concern with an individual. It might be about performance, it might be about a new manager, it might be about interactions or something, but that's generally where a grievance comes from, isn't it? Because we're actually getting that performance management right. Because again, it comes back to really what we've just been saying there is, well, they're rubbish at the job. Well, have you ever told them?
Yeah.
Oh no, I haven't told them.
Yeah.
But they'll know that they're rubbish at the job. Well, how are they going to know how are they going to know what your expectations and standards are of them delivering the role? Absolutely. If you've never done a probation review meeting with them, if you've never met with them to be able to discuss what the role actually entails, but then you're quite prepared to give up on them and lose that person when actually you've spent no time nurturing them and bringing them on board.
And I think they do. I think they don't look back and kind of go, how did we get to this point? They get to a point where they go, I don't want this person in the business any longer. And then when we unravel it and ask the questions, which is what we would do, they've actually not had any conversations with them. There's a lot of assumptions that, well, of course they know what they should do. Of course they should know that I don't need to ask them to do that. I don't want to have conversations with them all the time. Well, actually, if you had done that and they were clear on what was expected of them, would you be in this situation? Well, I don't want to deal with it. I just want them out. Well, why would you do that in this way when you haven't, had reviews with them? And it's interesting because I don't think people use probationary periods as much as they should.
Yeah.
And, there's a purpose for them being in, and actually it can resolve a lot of issues early on because, the probationary period is a time for the business to see if the person's doing the role they want them to do and the person to see if it's the business they want to be part of. So it's a great opportunity to make that work and really review how they're performing. And if there's signs in that time when it's not working, then you have a conversation with them, because when else would someone be at their best than when they're in their first few weeks of a new job?
Yeah.
So if they're not at their best then, that's a warning sign for me, and that we would want to talk to them and, really be clear. Have we set their expectations? Do they know what's expected of them? Are they on time? If they're not, why? And have those conversations. And if it's not going to work out, it helps everybody if you have that conversation in the right way and they don't stay in the business. If you don't think they're going to be able to turn it around and they're not wanting to, then why would you keep them any longer?
Yeah.
The earlier you can have that conversation,
Absolutely.
the better.
Yeah.
Because one of my personal favourites in terms of comments, well, I've put up with it for all this long. And yes, you've put up with it for all of that time, but you haven't actually said to them, I'm not happy with what I'm putting up with from you. This is what you need to do. So how do they know? How do they know if you don't tell them that it's not, whatever they're doing isn't good enough, doesn't meet the standard that you require? To then say a year in, I've put up with it for a year, it doesn't really work, does it? They didn't know that they weren't doing what you wanted.
Yeah. And so I think you can't express enough kind of that element around probation reviews or kind of the regular check-ins. And the other thing that always concerns me is between the probation review point might be, I don't know, it might finish in March or something, but then they might not do an annual review or something, or no formal catch-up until, or any catch-up until January next year. So actually you're just letting people float along, aren't you? And and that's when, like what you've just described, Deb, that's when people are, well, I'm sick of what they're doing, but they've never had that conversation. So communication, I think, comes back as being key to the management of the employees, and also helping with the retention element of what it is that we want to do.
Well, that's it. You make a big investment of bringing somebody into your business and, training them, so that they can do the role you want them to do, and then not to continue with that or just to let them flounder without kind of those regular check-ins. If you're then going to go out and recruit and start it all again, it's quite a costly business, isn't it? And also it's the ripple effect it has on your other employees, because if they see a high turnover, they see people not staying, or they see people, frustrated because they're not being spoken to and developed and regular conversations, they then look elsewhere.
Yeah.
So it has a big ripple effect if it's not just that one employee, is it?
Oh, no, I think, and one of the things I always say, other people are watching, so other people are looking to see how a manager's going to deal with the situation. They kind of, for all it's not kind of up there saying, I'm watching what you're doing, but actually I'm watching it, but how are you going to handle that situation as an employee to think, is she going to lead that in the right way? Is she going to do what needs to be done? And for all people who don't necessarily know the outcome of it, they know that there's been something that's happened. Yeah. And I think if there's been an incident in the workplace, there needs to be some accountability that is shown, and that people know that you will deal with situations that come up as well.
And it's back to that fairness, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why should I come to work on time every day when someone else is consistently late and nothing ever happens? So the outcome is that they get fed up of that and decide to leave, or they decide to be late as well because nothing happens.
Nothing happens,
when they do it anyway.
Yeah.
So what have they got to lose?
And I think a perfect example of when I used to work in automotive, I used to be late every single day. I used to start at 5 to 8. I used to come in about 8:15. And it wasn't like I was putting my feet up at home. You run around with the kids and dropping people off and stuff like that. And then 15-minute walk from the car park just to get in. So I would just always be late. Nobody ever said, Louise, I think you need to be on time. But I was more than happy to discipline people that were late. But again, it came back to the accountability that actually if someone had said to me, Louise, do you not think you need to try and be on time? I would have gone, do you know what? Yes. I'll get myself sorted out and I'll go. But I was never told to task over it, so it continued on. Don't get me wrong, I used to stay later on at night time, and that's probably where the balance was alleviated there. But the actual fact that you were still having that conversation with somebody else to say you shouldn't be late, I'm going to give you a disciplinary because we've had 3 occasions when I'm actually doing it every day. So it's kind of about fairness, it's about consistency, and it's about the approach to make sure that everybody's treated, such as lateness. If it is a blanket approach, that needs to be that you're taking people's consideration of circumstances, but that's how it's put across.
I think it's about back to standards and expectations, because actually if someone else is coming in late and nothing's being done, then everyone will then drop their standards because that's the norm. So rather than bringing somebody in, and sometimes we hear businesses where we've brought someone in that were brilliant at the beginning and then they're not. Well, actually that's because rather than keeping at the standard they've come in, they've dropped to the standard of other people, whether it's lateness, whether it's I'll take me dinner now, whether it's like, oh well, it doesn't really matter about that because no one is going to say anything. You kind of go, well, it's all right for them, so it's all right for me. Why should I put myself out? Why should I work to that level if nothing's different? And actually that came up in one of the businesses the other day, someone who was underperforming, but she was pregnant, and all the things that came with that element of kind of trying to manage it. And then it was like, well, I just need to ride it out for another month. But then other people had dropped their performance because actually that person wasn't doing what they needed to do, But the element of risks there was that this lady was pregnant. So kind of from a performance management point of view, created more of a situation for many other reasons that went into there as well. But, it does kind of highlight, and you don't want people dropping down. You want to raise the standards as opposed to pull the standards back down. That probably leads us on nicely, Claire, to one of the clients that you've got at the moment. Claire's looking at me, who have I got? Over in the Lake District, that you've got a business which is kind of really fundamentally fell apart, hasn't it? Because of the people that are in that situation. Do you want to just kind of explain a little bit about what's happened and what you're doing within there? Yeah, it's quite an interesting one because it's quite an established business. So it's not a start-up. It's been in place for quite a number of years. But actually, with the change of leadership, so it's a company that's not, its head office is out of the UK. They've got some other businesses across Europe, but actually this one in particular had a change of senior leader, and the business fell apart very, very quickly. But because people weren't on the ground to see it, it didn't come across to them. They were hearing one side of it, and it accelerated very quickly at the beginning of this year, where 2 senior people left the business, and they've put a lot of input into that now. And, a lot of the employees that work there were really, really unhappy, really disgruntled, and were looking for other jobs. And some of them have worked there, a long time. Some of them, it's their only job. So for them to think, actually, I need to go and look somewhere else. And one of the fundamental reasons for it was a manager that was in place that was not being upfront, truthful and honest with them, and was playing on his own agenda, and had caused a lot of upset from that. So now I think the input is they really need some support from us, and being on site. It's really about listening. There's 40 employees there, and I've spoken to all of them twice when I've been over there to hear what is it like to work here, what really works, what doesn't, what needs to be different. Because my overarching experience is, if you ask the people who are doing the jobs, they'll tell you the art of it is if the leaders will listen and do something about it. And I think that's where we're at with this business. It's very much around, tell us what's going on, tell us what's not working and what is, and what needs to change. And a lot of it is about them feeling valued and feeling listened to, and that somebody wants them to be there, and that people are truthful with them. So a big thing was around Chinese whispers, as they described it, and one thing coming from one manager and another, playing them off against each other, and that was really challenging for them. I think they're all feeling in a much better place because that manager's now not in the business, and the senior leaders from outside of the UK have noticed that, and they're really, really keen that we don't repeat that mistake again. And we're supporting them on what does that look like, and the cultural piece. So we talked earlier about about culture and, that underpinning it. It's really key in this business for that. What is really challenging and what they're finding now is because we're talking to people, they're telling us things and they've never had that opportunity before. So they're a little bit like, oh, I didn't realise this was happening, but that's because no one's ever asked the question.
Yeah.
So when you ask the question, things will arise. So we are in the midst of that.
You're really still fact finding out at the moment, aren't you?
Absolutely, yeah. But they feel supported, both when I'm on site and when it's remote. So you don't need to be on site every day. I had lots of conversations with them, but the fact that they've got that support, they've got someone that we can talk to, they really, can see a difference and they can really hear us talking about what's underpinning it. So contracts, policies, handbook, the culture, what upskilling do the managers need? So there's a set of managers in there who are managers because they were going to leave. So it was a bit of a tool to keep them. They've been given a job title. I don't know what that means. I don't know what difference it makes. And they don't know what that means when they're dealing with the teams and who's in their teams and what that looks and feels like. So it is really about putting those foundations in place with them. And they're a little bit of the, I don't know what I don't know, but they're absolutely willing to learn. And it's not that they don't want to do the role. It's they've never been told or shown or asked to do that. So I think that is a longer piece of work that we'll be doing with them. But in the short space of time, you can start to see a big difference. But I'm sure there'll be some highs and lows before we get it to a stable place. Yeah. Definitely.
But just interest in being able to support a business in that way, to be able to go in, to be able to, it's the added value, isn't it?
Absolutely.
We're going in and adding value to them. And as you say, some things that from your point of view is probably quite quick wins, to be able to go in there and support them. But and as you say, other parts of it is going to be kind of the longevity. It's longer, it's going to take time. But ultimately we should be in a better position where, they don't need to recruit as many people, the retention's better, people are more stabilised, they've got good job descriptions in place, they've got the structure that they need, they've got the voice that they need, that people are being listened to. So there's so many benefits of what's going to come out of that in kind of 6 months' time. Yeah. It should look like a completely different workplace to where it is now, isn't it?
Definitely.
And I think, Deb, you've kind of come across a couple of smaller situations where actually are really, really difficult to deal with, where you're in a small workplace situation and then you've got people who are disgruntled with each other, really, isn't it? Kind of just one particular one that we kind of like to talk about is, because it's gone on for that long, is kind of having 4 people in the room and then one of them kind of upsetting the others, and then one leaving the room, one coming back to the room.
And I think that just has been an ongoing situation that has just deteriorated to the point that now no one wants to work in the room with any of the other people, I think is the point that we've reached now.
Yeah.
But I think it's a perfect example of if the situation isn't managed. Mm-hmm. I think in the beginning, some consideration to each other and the fact that when you work with other people, you've got to have some tolerance of the things that they do. But I think that's just moved on now to no one has been tolerant of anyone, and now we just can't work together anymore.
Now we've got like a full situation. The team's completely fragmented. Nobody will work together and put it back together again, will it?
No, and now and then you start to need to look at bigger solutions such as restructures and changing jobs and all of those things, which really now we've reached a point that we need to start considering, where previously some conversations, possibly some mediation might have brought that about. Mm-hmm.
And I think in that situation, even some support from a mental health point of view.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
One of the individuals, I think, is, I know we've talked about mental health quite a lot, and obviously we're running a seminar soon on that as well. And I just think that there is the element of it, kind of that we need to, that mental health element is involved in conversations. And I know that we kind of introduce that into our clients a lot, don't we? Because there are people, a lot of people that need some type of support. And we're not saying every business needs to support every employee, but actually sometimes some businesses do need to help some individual. And if they're willing to help, then potentially that situation might not have escalated as bad as what it did.
Absolutely. It's providing that support, and I think also trying to encourage that awareness in your other employees as well, so that they can have an understanding of why someone might behave in a certain way.
Yeah.
Because we do still sometimes get reactions of, yes, but it's all about that person.
Yeah.
It's a show about that person, and it isn't about that, but it, like any kind of illness, we need to make reasonable adjustments for that person.
Yeah. And it's difficult, when we're coming across things like ADHD. Someone spoke to me the other day, and the woman spoke to me the other day initially who had the ADHD diagnosis, but the business hadn't done anything to be able to accommodate. And when I spoke to the business, they were like, oh no, we haven't even met with her. We haven't done this. We haven't done that. I was thinking, these are really important points. And actually you need to take responsibility as a business owner to ensure she's, at work, and, if reasonable adjustments can be made, that they're put in place, but the conversation needs to start. And certainly that hadn't started, which was kind of a bit of a...
But I think it's back to what Deb was saying earlier about when someone's off sick or, they've got a grievance and they don't want to speak to them, it makes the situation feel worse for the individual, and the business are worried about saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. Where actually, I think it's the same with mental health, isn't it? The worst thing you can do is not do anything. That in itself is doing something, isn't it? By not. Yeah. So I think there is definitely an awareness around that, and actually, finding a way through it to have a conversation. And we're not asking people to be experts in this area, because we know ourselves how difficult it can be, and every situation's different because every person's different. But I think not addressing it and not having an awareness around it can be very detrimental to the business and the individuals.
Yeah. And there's services out there that are for everybody, aren't they?
Yes.
So we've got some services that are kind of, expensive and kind of really high end, that kind of have definitely got that place, with working with people who've got, real severe issues. But then all the way through to kind of, grievance counsellors and kind of, companies that just provide counselling services and kind of got an extensive range. It might be someone who's got divorced or grievance or something to do with a child. We've got access to all sorts of different things like that. And it's about, sometimes the company just need to be able to ask.
Just signpost them, isn't it?
Yes. And they don't always need to pay for it themselves, but to be able to help people to be able to do that. And I know the seminar that we're running is around kind of what people need to do in the business with regard to people with mental health concerns, isn't it? They've come to them, what is it that they should do? What should they say? How should they react? Who should they turn to? Kind of, those things. And actually, for me, I think that's kind of fundamental as a leader, that they need to know what to do in the right time. And I'm not saying they need to know what to do in every given situation, but if they've got a good understanding or a good place to turn to, then I think that makes a massive difference as well.
Yeah, it does, because it's providing that support. Or sometimes there have been concerns or performance issues or conduct issues that have arisen from someone's mental health.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes the concern is that it then just is ignored, because actually we don't know what to do with that, and it's going to be quite difficult, and it's connected to mental health, so maybe we just won't do anything.
Yeah.
So the conduct issue hasn't been resolved, or the performance issue hasn't been resolved because it's just too difficult, and that isn't helping the person who has the issue in the first place either.
No, it doesn't help them.
It won't get better when it's just left alone.
No, definitely not. And sometimes it's once the business has got knowledge and they need to take action, whatever that action looks like, they need to take some action, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can't deny that something, once you know it.
Yeah.
Once it's out there, isn't it?
That's it. And I think, we were having these conversations about, health questionnaires, as part of our pack, we give health questionnaires, and then if people, what's the point of filling them in if you're not going to then have a follow-up conversation with them?
Yeah.
And, I had one the other day, and they were like, oh, there's a couple of things on there, but it's fine because they're saying they're dealing with it. And I was like, well, let's have a conversation about it, because actually if anything's to come up in the future, at least we can say it wasn't just a tick box exercise.
Yeah.
We've had a look at it and we've had a conversation and we've got some notes, and then, they know that we're interested and that we've listened to them.
Yeah.
And they know, that we've got some notes, and if anything was to come up, then we've got that to refer back to, which is back to what we said before, is if that was ever, escalated and ends up in a process where they're dismissed, that first conversation about their health, we had a conversation about their questionnaire.
Yeah. And I think, again, that's a really relevant point, and that's something that's come up recently. One of the grievances I was dealing with, and it's about the evidence that was there to support the information in the first place, or not there in the case that we had. Just moving on to, obviously recently there has been some kind of topical areas that cover from a HR point of view. We've had things like strikes, which I don't think we'll particularly get into today because it's a whole complex area and kind of opinion based for lots of different people. But one that I did just want to touch on was about the 4-day working week. And I know there's obviously been kind of lots of trials and things that have taken place in different businesses, different size businesses. You're not doing 4-day work week, just to establish. But what's your opinion of a 4-day work week? What impact do you think it has on the individual? And maybe you, Claire, the individual, and you, Deb, the business side of things?
I think from an individual point of view, I think the thing for me for a 4-day week, there's two elements of a 4-day week. So there's a compressed hours where if you're 40 hours, instead of doing it over 5 days, you do 4 10-hour days, and you've got a 3-day weekend or a third day, which I think people really like from a work-life balance and an extra day, and who out of all of us don't want the extra day to kind of, do the job that you can't do or that you're trying to fit in around everything.
Yeah.
I think though from that, you've got to be really mindful that being at work for 10 hours
It's a long day.
without your breaks.
Yeah.
Because I think we have to bear that in mind. It's not 10 hours, it's 10 hours plus your breaks. And then you travel, if you've got to travel to it, is a very long day. And actually, does that help your well-being and, that work-life balance? So I think there's that. And then I think there's also the other trial where people have been doing, well, actually, it's about productivity. So actually, if you work 4 days and you're paid for 4 days, are you more productive because you haven't got that 5th day to do your work in? So again, I think employees and individuals probably favour that one because, it's all in those 4 days and the normal working hours, if you like, a 9 to 5 or whatever. But then, you've got to go, what happens when it doesn't fit into the 4 days and where does the work go? Because the work doesn't disappear. Yeah. So actually, if you're not productive, then where's the challenge coming in from a business point of view? So if you're thinking, well, I've got someone Monday to Thursday, it's not finished by Thursday night. Is it okay for it to roll off at a Monday morning or not? And then how do you do that? And then are you going to have to pay for overtime on a Friday or something like that? So I think it's very much favoured by individuals, I think, but I think it's about getting into the detail of actually what is your business and will it suit that business?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's about making sure the individuals all don't have a Friday afternoon, a Friday off, isn't it? Because actually then your business closes because you've got nobody running on a Friday.
Yeah, so. And if your clients don't work a 4-day week, then your clients have got expectations on that day. So you're right, it's absolutely about spreading that 4 days across
the week,
a working week, isn't it? And for lots of businesses, the working week does include weekends. So, it's a 7-day operation and it's 4 days out of those 7, isn't it?
I think it's setting those parameters, isn't it? To look at your business, what does your business need and how could that work for your business? Yeah. Because as you say, if everyone wants a Friday off, that's all very nice for the people who are off on a Friday, but then who does deal with the clients on a Friday? Yeah. Who does get those jobs done? So it's taking a detailed look, I think, as in you would with any other flexible working situation. I think it's the same, when we've discussed in the last few years, working from home, that can work really well, but it needs to be planned and organised properly. Yeah. And it can work really well in some situations, but some situations it just isn't suitable for. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And some businesses have to trust people when you talk about the working from home. And one of our clients is adamant that they do not allow people to work from home. They don't mind if someone's getting the boiler fixed or something, but there's not a plan in place to work from home. And even from a recruitment point of view, I've tried to say, you're struggling to recruit. Would you not offer the opportunity that someone works at home a couple of days a week? And they are absolutely not. That's just not going to work, which is kind of a bit of an older style, isn't it? Because actually, because of COVID, we've kind of, probably 10, 15 years in advance of where we need to be. Yeah. But it's now a new way of working. Like we work from home, we work from the office, we work on a client site. We're completely flexible about where that we work. And really the times around how we need to work within there as well. So I think that's quite an important element of it, isn't it?
And it's a two-way process, isn't it? That with a lot of employees, you do get that buy into it and you will get that flexibility back. Yeah. That they might then, do the letter that needs doing at 6:00 because it's desperately important. Yeah. Where if you have a rigid, no, you have to work, from 9 till 5, then it's more likely that they're not going to put that extra in. They just think, well, I finish at 5 and there's no movement there, so that's the end of the working day.
And I think a lot of businesses don't recognise that their businesses run on a lot of goodwill. Yes. Yeah. So, there's not a lot of people only work their
4 hours,
Is there? Do you know what I mean? No. Because there is that give and take, there is that flexibility that is needed. And I think with that comes the goodwill. And I think if you are very stringent on what it is and you're not prepared to negotiate or flex or whatever word it is you would use for your business, then your employees won't do that either because you can't expect not to give it and, for them not to be in the same position. So, but I think that's that evolving, isn't it? That's that change. And I think COVID's been really challenging in that period when it was the first of everything that we've talked about before. But actually the workplace has evolved incredibly quickly since then.
Since that time. A lot, I think it's advanced quicker than what it would have
Very
definitely
much
been.
so, yeah.
I don't think we would be at this point where we are now.
No.
And I think even when I joke there and said, well, you're not doing a 4-day week, but I think we have a huge amount of flexibility around what it is that we do, kind of, if you don't need to sort the kids out or go to the nativity play or kind of whatever it may be, pick somebody up from football or something, I expect as a mum that's what, that my team have got that flexibility in their lives to be able to go and do that, because actually, you have to work to be able to live, but obviously, your life is very, very important and you've got to have that flexibility back over. So I suppose that's how it's then built into.
But it's back to that culture, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's that culture and that trust and, this is what it feels like to work here.
Yeah. And actually, it was a comment Haley made the other day was kind of, like Oculus has brought people together for a reason, kind of, and it fits with the lifestyles of how people want to live and work, isn't it? If you're sitting watching netball at 6 o'clock at night, you might do a quick letter, because you think, well, I'll take that, I'll do that, because I'm actually going to do something tomorrow morning. I need to go to the doctor's or something. Like whatever it may be, the flexibility is there to be able to live the life that you need to do whilst working, isn't it? So, which kind of sidesteps a little bit from the 4-day working week, but I think probably just shows that there's flexibility around. It doesn't have to be and I know we're smaller, so it's different to kind of a big corporate or something kind of introducing a 4-day working week, but I think it'll be interesting over the coming months, years of how that'll happen and how we'll see it happening and people's reaction to it. I think it's a bit of a one to watch, isn't it?
I think it's the same as like hybrid work and that you were saying there, isn't it? So I think, COVID, it was like everybody was in an office, everybody's at home forced, and then there's a little bit of, hybrid's a bit in the middle, but there's still a bit of, do they still want offices, do they not, cost of living, do people want to be at home to work? There's so many different streams to it, isn't it? It evolves. So I think you're right, the 4-day working week's probably in the same positioning as hybrid working as, it'll evolve and, it's about understanding if it'll fit in with the business.
With the actual business needs. And one which I just thought was different, I just read something about it yesterday, so apparently in Spain they've just introduced just in February time that they'll do menstrual leave for ladies, and they'll actually be paid 3 working days, which will be extended up to 5 working days with a doctor's note. And there's a couple of other countries in the world, a couple of others, so Japan, Taiwan, Indonesia, South Korea, and then Zambia, who've all introduced the same thing. What you kind of, I know, I understand it's a really good thing from a woman's point of view, that obviously there's things that are in place to be able to support women in different circumstances and situations. But what would happen if somebody kind of took every month off? Kind of like it's the 20th of the month, I'm going to take 3 days off now, kind of, and actually if we're all female and we're all taking the same amount of time off, then it's a different thing, isn't it? And it's kind of, I can imagine have quite a significant impact upon businesses. Obviously it's not happening in the UK, I'm just talking about Spain at this point, but you can imagine the impact that it has upon a business, can't you? And you can understand why they've done it.
I think that's it. I think we can probably say from both points of view, we're all female and you think, well, actually, there may have been a time or there's a time when actually that would be really beneficial. I think it's about understanding the ins and outs of it, because there'll be more to it than that top line, won't there, of exactly, well, what does that entail and what does it feel like and do that. This was one of the conversations we were having before, is what impact will that have on a female dominated business, and will that impact on recruitment? Because actually, if you think there's going to be gaps in the month where people are going to be off because they're going to get paid, that could have quite an impact on the business, and it's balancing that commerciality that we talked about at the beginning, isn't it, in the business. So I think it's again something else that's evolving, isn't it, around it. I think it'll be interesting to see how Spain copes with it and deals with it, and what that looks like. And actually, I have seen some businesses on LinkedIn, I'm not sure if it was Spanish orientated, but where they have launched that, and that was from International Women's Day. So we talk about that in that really positive way, and that's great. But actually, on the flip side of a business, what would that feel like to have something
the commercial viewpoint of it
place like that? And are we creating that female-male divide even further?
Yeah, it is, because obviously we talk about the menopause and we're talking about it hitting, it's not an exclusive club, it's female. Like you're in the club if you're a female. But you talk about those things and talking about how you've improved workplaces for it, and certainly, this will obviously have a place in the workplace and how it works, but just interested, it'll be interesting to see again how that evolves, because it's kind of the fundamental parts of the future, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think it's interesting to think of it as well from the point of view of, you would hope that if someone was experiencing symptoms that were so bad that they needed 3 days off a month, that there would be some kind of understanding there. Maybe they don't get 3 days off every month, but there would be some kind of understanding there, and some kind of adjustment could be made. Equally with sort of symptoms of the menopause and so on, you would hope that. But it's not really a one size fits all, is it? So
no, definitely not.
Thinking of it in a big scale, then yes, you can absolutely see the problems that would come about.
And I think it's not a subject that people feel comfortable at. People don't feel comfortable. Even some females don't feel comfortable talking about that in the menopause. We're just starting to really have that talked about in open conversation, isn't
Definitely,
it?
yeah.
So I think to bring that into the workplace when people see it as a really private part of their lives, I think it's that, the emotion that's attached to it, isn't it?
I'm just imagining being in the workplace and like, oh, why is Claire off it? Oh, she's got a
exactly. People can't even say the word they have to always go, period. And you're like, for goodness sake,
so everybody knows when you've come back to work why you've been off.
Absolutely, isn't it? Like that. And if people are private and they don't feel comfortable, it's the same with the menopause. People are not feeling that, only just, we've done the podcast with Mrs. Menopause, that it's because we want it to be talked about more for people to feel more comfortable in doing that. But if you're in a male-dominated workplace and you're a smaller number of females and your boss is a male, that's not a comfortable conversation for either party. Because men don't like to talk about it at all, even if you feel comfortable as a woman. So I think it is one to watch definitely for the future.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. So, well, thank you very much, ladies, for coming in today. I mean, obviously, we've talked about so many different areas as far as kind of, everything from grievances to policies, procedures, contracts, and, a little bit kind of opinion based on new things that are coming out and kind of what's happening, from a commercial point of view out and about as well. I just think there's so many kind of takeaway pieces, isn't it? Just to make sure that we've got, companies have got the right things in place, that they understand the consequences of what it is that they do, that they speak to people, that they communicate to people, that they listen. They listen, that they've got their workforce and the kind of the employees that they've got, that they're nurturing them and just trying to really encourage them to do the right thing at the right time, isn't it? But supporting them throughout more than anything else. So from the point of view of Oculus HR, obviously we've got our podcast, so we're obviously keen for people to register and to download our podcasts and keep on listening. We're aiming to put new people on and new environments and new things that people would be interested in listening about. So if you do ever have any suggestions, then do please feel free to get in touch as well. Thank you for listening to the Real World HR podcast with our fantastic HR team here. If you need any support with things that we've discussed on the episode or any other areas of HR, then do get in touch with me at louise@oculus-hr.co.uk. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out on any future episodes, and please do leave us a rating and a review. Real World HR, putting the human back into HR.